Elijah Banks mopped the dojo floors each night in silence, invisible to the black belts who mocked him daily. They saw only a janitor, never the calluses on his hands or the watchful precision in his eyes. For 9 years, he'd buried his past. Beneath the uniform of humility, the national championship medal hidden in his locker alongside his tarnished dreams. Coach Derek Walsh, who built his reputation on broken spirits, thought it hilarious to challenge the cleaning staff to a public exhibition match. "Let the janitor show us his broom-fu," he announced to laughing students. They expected humiliation. They never expected that the man who polished their mats had once polished trophies, or that today he would finally step back onto the mat and show them the difference between fighting and mastery. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The fluorescent lights of Wilson's Martial Arts Academy flickered to life as the evening classes ended. Students filed out, their laughter and chatter filling the hallway while Elijah Banks quietly entered through the back door, pushing his cleaning cart. At 34, Elijah moved with a grace that seemed at odds with the worn janitor's uniform he wore. His eyes, deep and observant, took in the scene without betraying emotion. Evening. He nodded to a group of black belts who brushed past without acknowledgement. To them, Elijah was as much a fixture as the water fountain or trophy case, present but unworthy of notice. Coach Derek Walsh stood at the center of the training floor, his powerful frame still impressive at 45. A former tournament champion with a collection of trophies that dominated the front office, Derek had built Wilson's into the most prestigious dojo in Riverdale. His reputation drew serious students from 3 counties, and he never let anyone forget it. "Nate, adjust that stance. You're representing Walsh technique." Derek barked at his son, a mirror image of himself 20 years younger. Nate Walsh, 23 and already a third-degree black belt, corrected himself immediately, shooting a glare at the younger students as if daring them to snicker. Elijah quietly began his routine in the far corner, methodically wiping down the equipment racks. His movements were efficient, almost rhythmic. Though his eyes remained downcast, focused on his work, they occasionally darted up to observe the remaining students practicing their forms. Zach Peterson, a 19-year-old with bleach blonde hair, and the cocky demeanor of someone who'd never truly been tested, finished his final sequence with an exaggerated flourish. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he grabbed his towel and deliberately tossed it in Elijah's direction. It landed at the janitor's feet with a damp slap. "Make sure the mats sparkle, buddy," Zach called out, loud enough for his friends to hear. "My foot's royalty around here." He laughed, joined by Tyler Williams, another black belt whose family's wealth was exceeded only by their sense of entitlement. Elijah simply picked up the towel, added it to his collection bin, and smiled. A gesture so small and genuine it seemed almost out of place. "No problem," he replied, his voice calm and low. He returned to his mopping, the methodical strokes covering the blue mats in careful, measured patterns. "You really should be more respectful of the help, Zach," Tyler said with mock seriousness. Before both young men erupted in laughter again, the dojo gradually emptied as Coach Derek finished the final class of the day. "Lock up when you're done," he called to Elijah without looking in his direction. The words hung in the air, neither a question nor a request, merely an expectation that had long been established. "Yes, sir," Elijah replied to Derek's already. Retreating back, left alone in the expansive training space, Elijah's posture shifted subtly. He stood straighter, his shoulders relaxed but square. His eyes, previously downcast, now scanned the room with intense focus. He resumed cleaning, but his gaze lingered on the technique posters lining the walls. As he mopped, his lips moved. Silently, counting steps, analyzing positions, he paused at the heavy bag, glanced toward the door, then placed his hand against it with practiced precision. The bag barely moved, not a push, but a touch that spoke of intimate familiarity. Elijah's eyes closed briefly, a flicker of something, memory, perhaps, crossing his face before he resumed his work. The quiet hum of the air conditioning was interrupted by the sound of the back door opening. Nate Walsh had returned, apparently, forgetting something. He found Elijah meticulously cleaning the mirrors that lined the front wall. Nate moved to the center of the mat and began practicing a spinning hook kick, his frustration evident as he repeated the moves several times. Each attempt ended with a slight wobble, his balance compromised at the final extension. Elijah watched in the reflection of the mirror, his movements slowing. After the fifth attempt, he spoke without turning around. "You drop your right elbow too fast in that spin kick." Nate froze, turning to stare at the janitor who had dared to comment on his technique. "Excuse me, your elbow," Elijah said, still focused on the glass. "It drops before your hip rotates fully. Throws off your balance at the end." "Did I ask for cleaning staff commentary?" Nate's voice carried the sharp edge of wounded pride. Elijah shrugged. "Just an observation." He returned to his task, seemingly unconcerned with Nate's reaction. Left alone again, Nate scoffed but glanced at his reflection. After a moment's hesitation, he attempted the kick once more, this time consciously keeping his elbow in position. The difference was immediate. His foot connected with an imaginary target at perfect height, his landing solid and controlled. Nate's eyes widened slightly before narrowing with suspicion. He gathered his forgotten gym bag and left without another word. The next afternoon, as students prepared for class, Nate mentioned the encounter to his father. "The janitor tried giving me technique advice last night," he said with a dismissive laugh. Coach Derek looked up from his schedule. "Elijah? The quiet one." "Yeah, like he knows anything about proper form." A young white belt nearby spoke up hesitantly. "I heard him counting steps under his breath once. My dad said he might have done martial arts before." Derek's laugh filled the office. "If he's so good, why is he scrubbing floors?" He clapped his son on the shoulder. "Don't waste brain space on janitor wisdom, Nate. We've got a tournament to prep for." Later that evening, after the dojo had emptied, Elijah stood in front of his locker in the maintenance closet. It was small, rusty, barely big enough for his street clothes and a few personal items. He opened it carefully, reaching behind his lunch container to pull out a small wooden box. Inside lay a tarnished medal, national champion, middleweight division, the gold plating worn at the edges. Elijah ran his thumb over the engraved date, 9 years earlier. His mind flooded with fragmented images, hands raising his arm in victory, a room full of trophies, the sharp pain of injury, and betrayal that cut deeper than any physical wound. He placed the medal back in its hiding place and closed the locker. Elijah's small apartment was on the east side of town, a modest one-bedroom with sparse furnishings but impeccable cleanliness. The walls were mostly bare except for a single framed photo of a younger Elijah with his arm around a teenage boy in a wheelchair, his brother Marcus. After a simple dinner, Elijah moved to his bedroom and knelt beside the bed. He reached underneath and pulled out a flat box. Opening it revealed a neatly folded GI, once white, now slightly yellowed with age. The black belt coiled on top showed signs of extensive use, frayed at the edges, worn thin in the middle where it had been tied thousands of times. Elijah's fingers traced the embroidered name on the belt. He lifted it briefly, feeling its weight, both physical and symbolic, before carefully replacing it in the box and sliding it back under the bed. Not yet. The time wasn't right. The following day, the dojo was unusually crowded. A regional tournament was approaching, and Coach Derek had extended training hours for his competition team. "All right, gather round," Derek announced, clapping his hands for attention. The students formed a semicircle, arranged by rank with black belts at the front. "Today we're focusing on takedown defense. Nate, Zach, center mat for demonstration." As the two black belts squared off, Elijah entered quietly. Through the side door, he moved along the perimeter, emptying trash cans and replacing paper towels in the dispensers. Derek noticed him, and a smirk formed on his face. "Hey, Elijah," he called out loudly, stopping the demonstration. Every head turned toward the janitor. "Why don't you show us how you'd clean a takedown?" The room erupted in laughter. Tyler slapped his knee. "Maybe he can mop up Zach's technique." Elijah stood motionless, mop in hand, his expression unchanged. After a moment, he simply nodded and continued his work. The laughter gradually subsided, replaced by the sounds of practice resuming. Later, alone in the locker room, Elijah stood before the mirror. His reflection stared back, calm on the surface, but his eyes told a different story. He closed them, took a deep breath, and clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles whitened. Something had awakened in him, something long dormant but never truly gone. For 9 years, Elijah had buried that part of himself. 9 years of invisibility. 9 years of silence. He opened his eyes and unclenched his fist. The time wasn't right, but it was getting closer. "Excuse me." Elijah looked up from the supply closet inventory to find a girl standing in the doorway. She was perhaps 17, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and determined eyes that seemed to evaluate everything they saw. "Can I help you?" Elijah asked, setting down his clipboard. "I'm Kayla. Kayla Thompson," she said, extending her hand. "I just joined last week." Elijah hesitated before accepting the handshake. Students rarely introduced themselves to him. Most pretended he was part of the furniture. "Elijah Banks. Nice to meet you, Kayla. I just wanted to say thanks for keeping the place so clean. My last dojo was kind of gross." She smiled, genuine and warm. "Makes a difference when you're spending hours on the mats." "Just doing my job," Elijah replied, surprised by the simple acknowledgement. "Well, thanks anyway." Kayla turned to leave, but paused. "You move differently than most people." Elijah's expression remained neutral. "How so?" "I don't know exactly. Just balanced. Like you're always ready." She shrugged. "See you around, Mr. Banks." As Kayla walked away, Elijah watched her with curiosity. In a dojo full of strutting egos, her quiet confidence stood out. She moved with purpose, her footwork already showing the fundamentals of someone who paid attention to detail. Over the next few weeks, Kayla became the exception to Elijah's invisible status. She'd nod hello when arriving for class, sometimes, asking simple questions about where to find equipment or mentioning the weather. These brief exchanges didn't go unnoticed by the other students, particularly the black belts who had established the unspoken hierarchy that placed the janitor firmly at the bottom. One evening, as Elijah finished mopping the changing room floors, he believed himself alone in the dojo. He moved to the main training area where the wall-length mirrors reflected the empty space. For a moment, he stood still, then slowly shifted his weight, centering himself. With practiced precision, Elijah moved through a complex form. His hands cut through the air with controlled power, his stances low and stable. Each transition flowed seamlessly into the next, his breathing measured and deliberate. This wasn't the fumbling of an amateur or even the technical competence of a black belt. This was mastery, honed over decades and preserved despite years of disuse. A small gasp broke his concentration. Kayla stood in the doorway, her gym bag dropped at her feet, eyes wide with astonishment. "That was incredible," she whispered. Elijah immediately straightened, his face flushing slightly. "I was just stretching." "That wasn't stretching," Kayla said, stepping into the room. "That was a master-level kata, the Northern Tiger form. I've seen it in competitions, but never executed like that." Elijah picked up his mop, his momentary freedom vanishing beneath the weight of his disguise. "You must be mistaken. Why don't you train anymore?" Kayla asked, ignoring his denial. "You're clearly experienced." Elijah regarded her for a long moment, weighing his response. "Sometimes, the mat takes more than it gives," he finally said. "Be careful who you trust in that GI, Kayla." Before she could respond, the front door opened as Coach Derek arrived with several advanced students for the evening class. Elijah quickly resumed mopping. Once again, the invisible man. The following day's class demonstrated exactly what Elijah had warned about. Coach Derek was in rare form, pushing his black belts through increasingly aggressive drills while showcasing his own prowess. "Combat isn't pretty," Derek shouted as he demonstrated a particularly jarring throw on Tyler, who winced as he hit the mat. "Your opponent won't give you room to breathe, so neither will I." The students paired off for sparring, with Kayla matched against Nate despite their vast difference in rank and size. Elijah watched from the corner as he organized the equipment rack, his jaw tightening slightly. The mismatch was immediately apparent. Though Kayla moved well, defending herself admirably, Nate's aggression and experience overwhelmed her. A sweeping kick caught her ankle, sending her down hard on her shoulder. She cried out in pain. "Walk it off, Thompson," Derek called without stopping the match. "This isn't ballet class." Nate pressed his advantage, barely giving Kayla time to regain her footing. Elijah's hands gripped the shelf, his knuckles whitening as he restrained himself from intervention. After class, Kayla stayed behind to practice. Her shoulder clearly bothered her as she attempted a defensive stance, her balance compromised by the injury. "You're leaning to protect your shoulder," Elijah said quietly, approaching with caution. "It creates a blind spot." Kayla looked up, surprised. "I know, but it hurts to extend fully." Elijah glanced toward the office, confirming they were alone. "May I?" he asked, gesturing to her stance. When she nodded, he gently adjusted her foot position, creating a more stable base. "Drop your center of gravity. Let your core support your weight, not your upper body." He demonstrated the stance, then a simple but effective counter movement. The technique was unlike anything taught in Derek's curriculum, subtle, efficient, using minimal force for maximum effect. "That's amazing," Kayla said, successfully replicating the move. "Where did you learn that?" Elijah merely smiled, returning to his cleaning cart. "Your shoulder should feel better with that adjustment. Just don't put too much weight on it for a few days." Later that week, as students gathered before class, Kayla's improved technique caught everyone's attention. Her movements were sharper, more grounded. During sparring, she easily evaded Zach's aggressive charge, using his momentum against him, a technique unmistakably similar to what Elijah had shown her. "Whoa, where'd you learn that counter?" Tyler asked, genuinely impressed. "Elijah showed me," Kayla replied honestly. "It really works against larger opponents." The room fell silent. Zach and Tyler exchanged looks of disbelief before breaking into mocking laughter. "What? You trying to learn janitorial karate?" Zach sneered. "Maybe he can teach you the secret mop technique next." "Does he make you wax on, wax off?" Tyler added, eliciting more laughter. Kayla's face reddened, but she stood her ground. "You couldn't counter my move regardless of who taught it to me." Coach Derek, overhearing the exchange, frowned deeply. "All right, enough chatter. Back to drills." As the students dispersed, he added pointedly, "Kayla, let's keep janitor wisdom off the mat. You're here to learn proper technique." That evening, as Elijah finished restocking the restrooms, Derek cornered him in the hallway. The coach's imposing frame blocked the narrow passage, forcing Elijah to stop. "We need to talk, Banks," Derek said, his voice low but intense. "I hear you're giving my students tips now." Elijah maintained his calm demeanor. "Just trying to help with a shoulder injury. Didn't mean to overstep." "You think giving tips makes you somebody in my dojo?" Derek moved closer, using his height advantage to intimidate. "Know your place. You're here to clean, not coach." "Didn't mean to offend," Elijah replied evenly. "Just trying to help where I can." Derek studied him for a long moment, searching for any sign of defiance. Finding none in Elijah's impassive expression, he stepped back. "Keep it that way," he warned before walking away. Unknown to either man, Kayla had witnessed the exchange from around the corner. Her curiosity about Elijah only intensified. That night, in her bedroom, Kayla opened her laptop and typed "Elijah Banks Martial Arts" into the search engine. The first few results were unrelated, social media profiles of other people, business listings. She refined her search, adding tournament and championship. A link to an archived newspaper article appeared. "Rising star Elijah Banks takes national title." The photo showed a younger Elijah, standing proud on a podium, gold medal gleaming around his neck. The caption identified him as the most promising middleweight competitor in a generation. Further searching led her to grainy footage uploaded to an old video sharing site. The 10-year-old clip showed Elijah in his prime, moving with the same flawless precision she had witnessed in the dojo. His opponents seemed helpless against his technique, not because of aggression or power, but through perfect timing and economy of movement. The comments section contained confused inquiries about his sudden disappearance from competition. What happened to Banks? He was unstoppable. Heard he got injured in training. No, it was something with his family. Kayla closed her laptop, mind racing with questions. The janitor who silently cleaned their mats was once a champion, perhaps one of the best. What had happened to bring him to Wilson's Martial Arts Academy, mop in hand, instead of wearing a black belt? The next day, Kayla arrived early for class. Elijah was arranging practice dummies in the corner, his back to the door. Without a word, Kayla walked directly to him and bowed deeply, the traditional sign of respect between student and master. Elijah turned, surprised by the formal gesture. "I know who you are," Kayla said quietly, "and I'm honored to learn from you." The mop in Elijah's hands trembled almost imperceptibly. In his eyes, a complex mixture of emotions, shock, pain, and something that might have been pride, flickered briefly before he regained his composure. "You shouldn't believe everything you read online," he said softly. "I believe what I see," Kayla replied. "And what I see is someone who understands these arts better than anyone else in this building." Elijah glanced toward the office, where Coach Derek was reviewing paperwork. "This isn't the place for this conversation." "Then where?" Kayla persisted. "I want to learn. Really learn. Not just for tournaments or belts." "You already have a teacher." "I have an instructor," Kayla corrected. "I'm looking for a teacher." Elijah regarded her thoughtfully, measuring her sincerity. The past he had tried so hard to bury was rising to the surface, brought forth by this persistent young woman who somehow saw through his carefully constructed anonymity. "I need to finish my work," he finally said, turning back to the equipment. Kayla's shoulders slumped in disappointment, but she nodded and walked toward the changing rooms. Behind her, Elijah's voice called out softly, "Persistence without patience isn't discipline, Kayla. It's just stubbornness." She paused, considering his words. "Then I'll be patient," she replied without turning around. "But I'll also be persistent." As classes began that day, something had shifted in the dojo's atmosphere. The whispers about Elijah grew louder, the stares more obvious. Kayla's discovery had created ripples that would soon become waves. Waves that would eventually break against the carefully constructed walls of pride, pretense, and buried truths that defined Wilson's martial arts academy. And as Elijah went about his duties, outwardly unchanged, something within him had awakened fully, a spark that had refused to be extinguished despite years of neglect. The question wasn't whether that spark would ignite into flame, but when, and what, or who would burn when it did. The morning sun had barely risen when Kayla arrived at the dojo. She found the doors still locked, the lights off. For 3 consecutive days, she had arrived early, hoping to catch Elijah alone before classes. For 3 days, she had been disappointed. Leaning against the brick wall, Kayla checked her phone again. No messages. No responses to her earnest requests for training. She was about to leave when she noticed a folded piece of paper tucked beneath a small rock by the side entrance. The door Elijah always used. Her name was written on the outside in neat, precise handwriting. "Meet me at West Side Park. 7 p.m. The old basketball courts. Come alone." No signature, but Kayla knew immediately. Her heart raced as she carefully refolded the note and slipped it into her pocket. The possibility of learning from someone like Elijah, a genuine master who had competed at the national level, was beyond anything she had expected when joining the dojo. That evening, as the summer sun hung low in the sky, Kayla made her way to West Side Park. The basketball courts were in the older section, mostly abandoned after the city built a new recreation center across town. The cracked concrete and rusted hoops stood as reminders of more active days. Elijah was already there, dressed in sweatpants and a simple gray t-shirt, no different from his usual attire except for the absence of his janitor's uniform shirt. He stood center court, eyes closed, as still as the fading daylight. "You came," he said without opening his eyes, sensing her approach. "Did you think I wouldn't?" Kayla asked, setting down her gym bag. Elijah's eyes opened, revealing a thoughtful gaze. "I thought you might reconsider. Training with the janitor isn't exactly going to boost your social standing at the dojo." "I don't care about that," Kayla replied with conviction. "I care about learning from someone who understands what martial arts is really about." A hint of a smile crossed Elijah's face. "And what do you think it's really about?" "Not what Coach Derek teaches," she answered immediately. "It's not about dominating opponents or looking impressive. It's—" she hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's about mastering yourself, isn't it?" Elijah nodded slowly. "That's a good place to start." He gestured to the court. "No mats here. No fancy equipment. Just what you bring with you. That's lesson 1. For the next hour, Kayla expected to learn advanced techniques, perhaps the spectacular moves she had glimpsed in the online videos of Elijah's competition days. Instead, he had her practice the most basic of stances, over and over again. "But I already know this," she protested after the 20th repetition. "You know the shape," Elijah corrected gently, "not the substance." He tapped her shoulder, causing her to wobble slightly. "See? Not rooted." Again, As darkness fell, they continued under the dim light of a single park lamp. Elijah taught not with harsh commands or criticism, but with patient guidance, occasionally demonstrating with a fluid grace that made the simplest movements seem profound. Before they finished, he asked her to throw a punch, just one, with full intention. When she did, he deflected it with minimal movement, causing her to stumble forward from her own momentum. There was no force in his defense, only perfect timing and position. That, he said as she regained her balance, is what we're working toward. Not force against force, but understanding how energy moves. When do we meet again? Kayla asked eagerly as they prepared to leave. Elijah considered for a moment. Thursday, same time. And Kayla, his voice grew serious. Tell no one. Not yet. These secret sessions continued for weeks. While Coach Derek's classes focused on competition techniques and aggressive sparring, Elijah's lessons covered aspects of martial arts that Kayla had never considered: breathing, centering, the philosophy behind the movements. He rarely demonstrated the flashier techniques that had made him a champion, instead emphasizing fundamentals and principles that applied regardless of style. But when will we do actual fighting? Kayla asked one evening after an hour of practicing. Transitions between stances, Elijah smiled patiently. Everything we do is fighting, and nothing we do is fighting. That's the paradox you need to understand. Despite her occasional frustration, Kayla could feel the difference in her movement, her balance, her understanding of space. Even her breathing had changed, becoming more measured and intentional. The changes didn't go unnoticed at the dojo. During a Thursday evening class, Coach Derek paired Kayla with a brown belt student for sparring. Where once she would have been overwhelmed, now she moved with quiet confidence, her defense nearly impenetrable. "Thompson," Derek called out, stopping the match. "Where did that come from?" "That's not the counter I taught last week." Kayla hesitated, aware of all eyes on her. "I've been practicing a lot, coach." "That's not practice. That's different technique entirely." Derek's eyes narrowed. "Who's been coaching you?" Before Kayla could formulate a response, Zach spoke up from the side of the mat. "Probably learning from YouTube or something. She's always got her phone out." "Is that it?" "YouTube?" Derek pressed, clearly skeptical. Kayla straightened her shoulders. "Elijah showed me," she said, deciding honesty was the best approach. "He helped me understand how to use an opponent's energy instead of fighting against it." The room fell silent. Derek's face darkened as he glanced toward the door where Elijah was replacing paper towels in the dispenser. "Everyone pair up for kicking drills," Derek commanded, his voice tight. "Kayla, see me after class." Later, as students filed out of the locker rooms, Tyler nudged Zach and nodded toward the windows overlooking the parking lot. "Check it out. Thompson's talking to the janitor again. Let's see what garbage man wisdom she's getting today." Zach snickered, pulling out his phone. He zoomed in, recording video of Kayla and Elijah in what appeared to be a serious conversation. "This is too good," Tyler grinned, watching Elijah demonstrate a subtle hand position. "Send that to the group chat." Within minutes, the video circulated among the advanced students with captions ranging from Kayla's private sensei to learning from the mop master. The mockery was immediate and merciless. The following day, as Kayla entered the dojo, she felt the shift in atmosphere immediately. Snickers followed her to the locker room, where she found a crude drawing of a stick figure with a mop taped to her locker. "Don't let it get to you," said a white belt girl named Rebecca, who had always been friendly. "They're just jealous because you're getting better faster than they are." Kayla nodded appreciatively, but the hurt was evident in her eyes. She had never cared much for the social dynamics of the dojo, but being openly mocked was harder to bear than she expected. During class, Coach Derek seemed to feed the negative energy. While demonstrating a takedown with Nate, he glanced pointedly at Kayla. "This is proper technique from a qualified instructor, not some janitor's half-remembered moves." Students laughed, and Derek, encouraged by the response, continued. "Hey, Kayla, tell Mr. Clean he can drop by next time and mop the floor with us." Literally. The room erupted in laughter. Kayla stood rigid, her face burning with humiliation and anger. From the corner of her eye, she saw Elijah enter with his cleaning cart, his timing unfortunately perfect to hear Derek's taunt. Elijah's face remained impassive as he began his routine, but Kayla noticed a slight tension in his shoulders, a tightness around his eyes that hadn't been there before. After class, she approached him in the equipment room. "I'm sorry about Coach Derek. That was completely out of line." "It's nothing I haven't heard before," Elijah replied, organizing the practice pads with methodical care. "But it's not right," Kayla insisted. "You know more about martial arts than anyone in this building. Why do you let them talk to you like that?" Elijah paused, considering his response carefully. There's a difference between being pushed around and choosing not to push back. One comes from weakness, the other from strength. "So you're just going to keep taking it? Forever?" "Not forever," Elijah said quietly. "Just until the right moment." The following week, tensions escalated further. Derek, perhaps threatened by Kayla's improvement or Elijah's subtle influence, became increasingly vocal in his disrespect. During a particularly crowded Saturday class with many parents watching, he directed his most pointed barb as Elijah cleaned the mirrors along the back wall. Derek loudly addressed the class. "Remember, everyone, this is a place of discipline and respect. We honor the traditions of those who built this art." He glanced deliberately at Elijah. "Know your place, Elijah. These mats aren't for you anymore." The silence that followed was heavy, expectant. Students shifted uncomfortably, some embarrassed by their coach's behavior, others waiting eagerly for Elijah's reaction, or lack thereof. But this time, something changed. Elijah set down his cleaning cloth and turned to face Derek directly. "I helped build these mats," he said, his voice quiet but clear enough to carry through the silent room. Derek's eyebrows shot up, clearly not expecting a response. Then his surprise morphed into a mocking smile. "Is that right? Well, since you're so invested in our mats, maybe you'd like to do more than just clean them." He strode to the bulletin board and tapped a brightly colored flyer. "We've got our open house coming up next month. Demonstrations, exhibitions, the works." His smile turned predatory. "Why don't we add a special sparring demo? Let the janitor show us his broom-fu." Scattered laughter rippled through the room, but it was uncertain, nervous. Even some of the black belts seemed uncomfortable with how far Derek was pushing. "That's not necessary," Elijah began, but Derek cut him off. "No, I insist. Unless, of course, you're not up to it." The challenge hung in the air, impossible to ignore or deflect. Elijah's eyes met Derek's, and for a brief moment, something passed between them. A flicker of recognition, perhaps, or a memory shared but interpreted differently. "I accept," Elijah said simply. Derek's grin widened. "Excellent. We'll make it the highlight of the day." He turned to the class. "Back to drills, everyone. We've got a special exhibition to prepare for." As the students dispersed, Derek approached Nate, Zach, and Tyler. "You boys will be participating in our little demonstration," he said in a low voice. "Time to show everyone what happens when a janitor forgets his place." The news spread quickly. Beyond the dojo. By the following day, flyers around town had been updated. Special exhibition. Black belts versus local legends. The mockery was thinly veiled but effective. No one took Elijah seriously. He was being set up for public humiliation. That night, Elijah sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the box he had kept hidden for 9 years. The GI inside represented a life he had walked away from, identity he had buried beneath the anonymity of his janitor's uniform. For hours, he remained motionless, lost in memories, his rise through the competitive ranks, the national title. The injury that should have been temporary but became permanent because of a betrayal he never saw coming. And the choice he had made to disappear from that world completely, focusing instead on caring for his brother when no one else would. 9 years of silence. 9 years of invisibility. That he slowly opened the box and lifted the GI, feeling the familiar weight of the fabric in his hands. The black belt remained coiled beneath it, waiting. With deliberate movements, he unfolded the uniform and laid it across the bed. Then, for the first time in nearly a decade, Elijah Banks stepped into his GI and tied his belt around his waist. The man who stared back from the mirror was neither the champion of the past nor the janitor of the present. He was something else. Entirely, someone who had learned lessons from both lives. The following evening, when Kayla arrived at the basketball court for their regular session, she found Elijah already there, but not in his usual attire. The white GI seemed to glow in the fading light, the black belt a stark contrast against it. Kayla stopped in her tracks, then slowly approached and bowed deeply. "You don't need to do that," Elijah said softly. Yes, I do, Kayla replied, straightening. It's not about the uniform. It's about respect for who you are and what you know. Elijah nodded, accepting her sentiment. Things are going to change after the exhibition. Whatever happens, you're going to show them who you really are, Kayla said, a mixture of excitement and concern in her voice. I'm going to show them what martial arts is supposed to be, Elijah corrected, not what they've turned it into. They trained differently that night, Elijah sharing more advanced techniques, preparing Kayla for what might come after. As they finished, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. I made this for you, she said, handing it to him. For the exhibition. Elijah unwrapped it to find a cloth headband, carefully hand-stitched with 2 words, earned, not given. He ran his fingers over the embroidery, deeply touched by the gesture. Thank you, Kayla. This means more than you know. You're not alone in this, she said firmly. Whatever happens, I'm with you. As Elijah tied the headband, something shifted in his demeanor, a quiet resolve that had been building for years finally crystallizing into certainty. The time for silence had passed. The invisible man was about to be seen. The parking lot of Wilson's Martial Arts Academy overflowed with cars on the day of the open house. Parents, prospective students, and curious locals streamed through the doors, drawn by colorful flyers promising demonstrations, children's activities, and the mysteriously advertised special exhibition. Inside, the dojo had been transformed. Streamers in the school's colors hung from the ceiling. Information booths lined the walls, and the main training floor had been cleared for performances. Music played through speakers as Coach Derek, dressed in his formal black GI with red trim, greeted visitors with practiced charm. Welcome to Wilson's, where champions are made, he repeated to each new arrival, directing them to refreshments and sign-up sheets for free trial classes that I in a corner near the equipment room. Elijah arranged extra chairs, still in his janitor's uniform. Few of the visitors paid him any attention, though occasionally someone would ask him where to find the restrooms or water fountain. Kayla arrived early, seeking out Elijah immediately. Are you ready? She asked quietly. He nodded, his calm demeanor unchanged. I brought my GI. It's in my locker. Coach Derek has been talking up the exhibition all morning, Kayla warned. He's making it sound like some kind of joke, the janitor, who thinks he knows martial arts. Let him talk, Elijah replied. Words don't win matches. Throughout the morning, demonstrations showcased the dojo's various programs. Children breaking boards to delighted applause, teenagers performing synchronized forms, and advanced students sparring with controlled precision. Coach Derek narrated each segment, emphasizing the discipline and excellence his school demanded. And now, Derek announced as the final scheduled demonstration concluded, we have a special treat for you all. His voice carried a subtle mockery that the visitors couldn't detect, but the regular students immediately recognized. One of our staff members has expressed interest in martial arts. He's been polishing our mats so long. Maybe some techniques rubbed off. Light laughter rippled through the crowd. We thought we'd give him a chance to show what he's learned by watching our classes. Derek gestured dramatically toward the back. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our very own Elijah Banks. The crowd turned expectantly. Elijah emerged from the changing room, no longer in his janitor's uniform, but dressed in his white GI, black belt tied perfectly around his waist, and Kayla's headband securing his short dreadlocks. A murmur of surprise spread through the audience. This wasn't the joke many had been led to expect. Elijah walked to the center of the mat and bowed respectfully to the assembled spectators, then to Derek, whose smug smile had faltered slightly at Elijah's unexpected appearance. For our first round, Derek continued, recovering quickly, Elijah will face one of our talented black belts, Zach Peterson. Zach bounded onto the mat, cocky and grinning. He performed an unnecessarily flashy bow, drawing chuckles from some spectators. Don't worry, he stage whispered to Elijah, loud enough for nearby visitors to hear. I'll go easy on the janitor. Derek signaled the start of the match. Zach immediately charged forward with an aggressive combination of punches, clearly intending to overwhelm Elijah quickly and end the exhibition in embarrassing fashion. What happened instead left the room. Breathless, Elijah moved with such subtle efficiency that it almost appeared as if Zach had thrown himself to the ground. With minimal contact, Elijah redirected Zach's energy, sidestepped his attack, and used a gentle sweeping motion to upend the young black belt's balance. Zach landed flat on his back, blinking in confusion at the ceiling. Elijah immediately extended his hand, helping Zach to his feet. "Good energy," he said genuinely. "Just needs direction." The crowd applauded politely, still not fully comprehending what they had witnessed. Derek's smile became fixed, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Well, beginner's luck perhaps," he announced. "Let's see how our janitor fares against Tyler Williams, one of our competition team members." Tyler approached more cautiously than Zach had. Having witnessed his friend's quick defeat, he circled Elijah, looking for an opening. When he finally attacked, it was with a well-executed combination of kicks and strikes that would have scored points in any tournament. Elijah's response was purely defensive. No counterattacks, no aggression. Yet he controlled the exchange completely. He blocked or evaded each technique with minimal movement. His footwork so precise it seemed as if he knew Tyler's intentions before Tyler himself did. After nearly a minute of Tyler's increasingly frustrated attacks meeting nothing but air or perfect blocks, Elijah finally responded. A simple redirection of Tyler's punch left the young man off balance, and a gentle foot sweep sent him tumbling to the mat. Again, Elijah immediately helped his opponent up, this time offering quiet words that only Tyler could hear. "Power isn't just about force. It's about timing." The room had grown unusually quiet. The spectators, many of whom knew little about martial arts beyond what they had seen in movies, nonetheless sensed they were witnessing something extraordinary. The regular students exchanged confused glances. This was not the humiliation of the janitor they had expected. Derek's forced smile had disappeared entirely. "Interesting techniques," he said, his voice tight. "Perhaps we should increase the challenge. Nate, would you join us?" Nate Walsh stepped onto the mat, his expression serious. As Derek's son and the dojo's star pupil, he represented not just his own skill, but his father's teaching legacy. He bowed to Elijah with unexpected formality. "Don't hold back," he said, quietly as they prepared to begin. "I never do," Elijah replied. The match began with explosive intensity. Nate was significantly more skilled than either Zach or Tyler, his technique refined by years of dedicated training and competition success. He attacked with purpose and control, each movement executed with technical precision. Yet against Elijah, even Nate's advanced skills seemed rudimentary. Where Nate moved with learned technique, Elijah moved with innate understanding. The difference was subtle but profound, like comparing someone who had memorized a language to someone who had been born speaking it. The pivotal moment came when Nate unleashed his signature spinning back kick, a technique that had won him numerous tournament points. Elijah, rather than avoiding it entirely, moved into the technique, nullifying its power and simultaneously disrupting Nate's balance. In one fluid motion that seemed to defy the expectations of everyone watching, Elijah countered with a perfectly timed sweep. Nate hit the mat hard. His signature move turned against him with devastating efficiency. The room fell eerily silent. Then, from somewhere in the back, a single person began to clap. Others joined in, the applause growing until it filled the dojo. Parents, visitors, and even some students were openly impressed by what they had witnessed. Elijah helped Nate to his feet. The young man's face registered not anger, but a kind of awakening. The recognition that what he had been taught as mastery was merely the beginning of understanding. "How did you counter that?" Nate asked, genuine curiosity replacing his earlier arrogance. "By listening to what your body was telling me," Elijah answered simply. Derek's face had darkened with each match, his confident demeanor crumbling as his top students were systematically outclassed by the man he had spent months mocking. The whispers were spreading through the crowd now. "Who is this guy? He's not just a janitor." Unable to contain his mounting humiliation, Derek stepped forward onto the mat. "Enough games," he announced, removing his coaching jacket. "I think our visitors deserve to see what a real martial artist can do." The crowd's murmurs intensified. This hadn't been on the program. The head instructor himself stepping in to face the janitor who had just dispatched 3 black belts with apparent ease. "This isn't necessary, coach," Elijah said quietly. "The demonstration has made its point." "Oh, I think it's very necessary," Derek replied, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. Let's see if you can handle a real fight. Elijah regarded him for a long moment, then bowed respectfully. This isn't about you or me, he said, loud enough for the front row to hear. It's about what the mat is supposed to teach, honor. Derek's face contorted with barely controlled rage. Let's see your honor when you're flat on your back, he spat, loud enough for many in the audience to hear. The atmosphere in the room had shifted dramatically. What had begun as entertainment had transformed into something more significant. A confrontation between two fundamentally different approaches to martial arts. The audience sensed it, falling silent as Derek and Elijah faced each other at the center of the mat. Unlike the previous matches, this one began with tense circling, each man measuring the other. Derek, despite his anger, was no fool in combat. As a former tournament champion himself, he knew better than to rush in blindly. Elijah remained calm, his breathing even, his stance relaxed but ready. His eyes never left Derek's, watching not just the man's physical movements but the intentions telegraphed through subtle shifts in weight and focus. When Derek finally attacked, it was with explosive power, a combination of strikes designed to overwhelm through sheer force and speed. Elijah defended fluidly, redirecting rather than blocking directly, conserving energy while allowing Derek to expend his. The pattern continued, Derek attacking with increasingly aggressive techniques, Elijah responding with minimal but perfectly timed movements. To the untrained eye, it might have appeared that Elijah was merely defending, perhaps even retreating. But those with knowledge could see the truth. He was controlling the engagement completely, dictating the rhythm and flow without seeming to do so. As the match progressed, Derek's frustration became evident. His techniques, while powerful, began to lose precision. His breathing grew more labored, not from physical exertion, but from the emotional toll of being consistently thwarted by Elijah's seemingly effortless defense. Fight back, Derek demanded through gritted teeth after another failed combination. I am, Elijah replied calmly. Just not the way you want me to. The response only fueled Derek's anger. He launched a renewed assault, abandoning some of his technical discipline in favor of overwhelming force. In that moment of emotional decision, the years peeled away, and Elijah saw not the dojo owner of the present, but the ambitious coach of the past, the man who had pushed him beyond safety, who had prioritized victory over well-being. Derek's next attack included a vicious leg sweep, a technique legal in competition but executed with malicious intent. The move mimicked precisely the one that had resulted in Elijah's career-ending injury years before. Elijah recognized it instantly. Time seemed to slow as memories flooded back. The tournament where Derek, then his coach, had urged him to compete despite a no-knee injury. The same sweep that had torn ligaments and ended his competitive career. The betrayal that followed. When Derek had abandoned him to focus on more promising students, the dojo fell silent as Elijah stopped moving, standing perfectly still as Derek's sweep approached. Many in the audience held their breath, anticipating a brutal contact that never came. With timing born from thousands of hours of practice and an understanding that transcended mere technique, Elijah executed a simple, perfectly timed pivot. Derek's sweep met nothing but air, the momentum carrying him off balance. Elijah moved then, not with anger or vengeance, but with controlled precision. A single palm redirection to Derek's extended arm, a subtle shift of his own weight, and a perfectly executed foot placement were all it took. Derek Walsh, owner of Wilson's Martial Arts Academy, former champion and self-proclaimed master, hit the mat with a resounding impact. Not violently thrown, not aggressively taken down, simply placed there by superior technique and understanding. The crowd gasped, then fell silent. Elijah immediately extended his hand, offering Derek the same courtesy he had shown each of his previous opponents. For a tense moment, Derek stared at the offered hand, his face a battlefield of conflicting emotions, rage, humiliation, and perhaps, deep beneath it all, a glimmer of recognition. Finally, he accepted the help, rising to his feet. Elijah leaned close and spoke words meant only for Derek's ears. You haven't changed, but I have. That's why I'm still standing. Derek remained frozen, too stunned to respond. In that moment of silence, Kayla stepped forward onto the mat and bowed deeply to Elijah. Without prompting, Nate joined her, followed by Tyler, and then others, students recognizing something authentic that had been missing from their training. From the back of the room, someone began to applaud. Others joined in, the appreciation spreading until the entire dojo resonated with it. A few voices even called Elijah's name, the respect in their tones unmistakable. Elijah stood quietly amid the recognition, his demeanor unchanged, no triumphant grin, no posturing, no ego. Just the same calm presence he had always maintained. Whether mopping floors or demonstrating mastery, as the applause continued, a distinguished older man in the front row, a guest instructor who had come to scout Nate for regional tournaments, approached Derek. "Impressive demonstration," he said, though his tone suggested the opposite. "But not what I expected from a school claiming to develop character along with technique." He handed Derek his business card. "I think we'll pass on featuring any of your students in the regional showcase. Your dojo teaches pride, not discipline." The man bowed respectfully to Elijah before departing. Derek stared at the card in his hand, then at the crowd still applauding the janitor. His face darkened as he realized the full extent of what had just happened, not just a personal defeat, but a public repudiation of everything he had built. Without a word, he pushed through the crowd toward his office, ignoring questions from concerned parents and confused students. Once inside, he slammed the door shut and stood facing the wall of trophies and certificates that had defined his identity for so long. In the harsh light of Elijah's demonstration, those symbols of achievement suddenly seemed hollow, their shine diminished by the revelation of a deeper truth about martial arts, one that Derek had long ago forgotten or chosen to ignore. That he slammed his fist against the desk, sending a smaller trophy crashing to the floor. The sound echoed in the empty office, a perfect counterpoint to the continued applause outside. Applause for the janitor, who had just shattered not just Derek's pride, but the carefully constructed illusion that had sustained Wilson's martial arts academy for years. The first cracks had appeared in Derek's empire. And as Elijah accepted the genuine respect of the crowd, respect earned not through intimidation or showmanship, but through authentic mastery, it became clear that nothing in the dojo would ever be quite the same again. The tension in the dojo was electric as Elijah and Derek faced each other at the center of the mat. The open house crowd, which had gathered expecting entertainment, now witnessed something far more profound, a confrontation years in the making. Every person in the room, whether martial arts practitioner or curious visitor, sensed the significance of the moment. Derek's eyes burned with a mixture of anger and wounded pride. His top students had been systematically outclassed by the man who had spent months silently cleaning their mats. Now his own reputation hung in the balance. Elijah, by contrast, remained a study in calm focus. His breathing was even, his stance relaxed yet prepared. The headband Kayla had given him, earned, not given, stood out against his dark skin, a reminder of the journey that had brought him to this moment. As the two men circled each other, the dojo felt eerily quiet. Even the children, who had been restless during earlier demonstrations, seemed to understand that something important was unfolding. Derek attacked first, explosive, aggressive, and calculated. His opening combination of strikes was textbook. Perfect, the kind of sequence that had won him tournament trophies and built his reputation as a formidable competitor. Elijah didn't block directly. Instead, he redirected, slipping just beyond Derek's reach with such subtle movement that it seemed as if Derek had simply missed his target. The coach's momentum carried him forward, forcing him to reset his position. "Fight back," Derek growled, loud enough for the front row to hear. Elijah didn't respond verbally, continuing his evasive strategy. Each time Derek attacked, Elijah neutralized the offensive without counterstriking, demonstrating a level of control that made Derek's aggression appear increasingly desperate. As Derek launched a particularly forceful kick, Elijah caught a glimpse of the past in his former coach's eyes, the same drive that had pushed a younger Elijah beyond his limits. In that instant, memories flashed through his mind. The national championship match, 9 years earlier. 25-year-old Elijah standing victorious, gold medal around his neck. Coach Derek Walsh at his side, arm around his star pupil's shoulders, basking in reflected glory. The endorsement offers that followed, opportunities that could have provided financial security for Elijah and medical care for his injured brother Marcus. Then came the betrayal. Derek pressuring him to compete in the international qualifiers despite a serious knee injury. Champions pushed through pain. Derek had insisted, "This is your shot at the big time. Our shot." When Elijah had hesitated, concerned about his brother's mounting medical bills, Derek had offered a solution: a contract with a predatory sponsor who would pay immediately but own virtually all of Elijah's future earnings. In his desperation to help Marcus, Elijah had almost signed. The final memory was the most painful. Discovering Derek had been negotiating a separate deal with the sponsor, one that would grant him a significant percentage as Elijah's coach. Regardless of Elijah's personal well-being or future, these fragments of the past flashed through Elijah's mind in seconds, fueling his resolve but not his anger. He had moved beyond anger years ago, replacing it with something more powerful: clarity. That Derek's frustration mounted with each failed attack. His techniques grew less disciplined, more fueled by emotion than strategy. "Stop dancing and fight," he demanded after another unsuccessful combination. "I am fighting," Elijah replied calmly. "Just not the way you taught me." The response only intensified Derek's determination. He pressed forward with renewed aggression, drawing on every technique in his arsenal. For a brief moment, his experience and skill broke through, landing a glancing blow to Elijah's shoulder. A murmur ran through the crowd. Derek's confidence surged visibly, his stance shifting from frustrated to predatory. "First blood," he muttered, audible only to Elijah. Elijah adjusted his position slightly, acknowledging the hit with a small nod. "Good technique," he said simply. Something about Elijah's composure pushed Derek over the edge. In a move that revealed more about his character than his martial skill, he launched into a dangerous leg sweep, the exact technique that had caused Elijah's career-ending injury years before. Time seemed to slow. Elijah recognized the move instantly, not just its physical mechanics, but the intent behind it. In Derek's eyes was the same callous disregard for his well-being that had characterized their final days as coach and student. The entire dojo held its breath as the sweep approached. Some of the more experienced practitioners recognized the potential for serious injury. Elijah stopped moving. For one heartbeat, he stood perfectly still, staring directly into Derek's eyes. Still scared, Derek smirked, believing Elijah had frozen in fear. The assumption couldn't have been more wrong. In that moment of perfect stillness, Elijah had achieved complete clarity about the past, the present, and what needed to happen next. With timing born from thousands of hours of practice, Elijah executed a simple but flawless counter. No wasted movement, no unnecessary flourish, just pure, refined technique that reflected decades of understanding. Derek, committed to his aggressive sweep, found himself completely off balance. Elijah's single controlled takedown dropped the coach to the mat with startling efficiency. Not violently thrown, not aggressively slammed. Simply placed there through superior technique and perfect timing. The impact resonated through the silent dojo. For several seconds, Derek lay on his back, the wind knocked from his lungs more by surprise than by force. Elijah immediately stepped forward and extended his hand, the same courtesy he had shown to Zach, Tyler, and Nate. The gesture contained no mockery, no triumph, only respect for the tradition of helping a fallen opponent. Derek stared at the offered hand, conflicting emotions warring across his face. Pride urged him to refuse, to rise on his own and salvage some dignity. But something deeper, perhaps a flicker of the martial artist he had once been, compelled him to accept. As Derek regained his feet, Elijah leaned close and spoke words meant only for his former coach. "You haven't changed. But I have. That's why I'm still standing." The simple truth of the statement hit Derek harder than any physical technique could have. For perhaps the first time in years, he found himself without a ready response, without a way to deflect or counterattack. In the silence that followed, Kayla stepped forward and bowed deeply to Elijah. Nate, surprising everyone including himself, followed her example. One by one, students from various ranks joined them, recognizing something authentic that had been missing from their training. That a spontaneous applause began at the back of the room, quickly spreading until the entire dojo resonated with it. Few people even chanted Elijah's name, no longer seeing the janitor but the master who had been hiding in plain sight. Elijah acknowledged the recognition with characteristic humility. No triumphant gestures, no self-congratulation, just a simple bow to the assembled crowd. His demeanor remained unchanged, as composed in victory as he had been in anonymity. As the applause continued, a distinguished older man made his way to Derek. Though dressed in casual clothes, his bearing marked him clearly as a senior martial artist. He was John Reynolds, a respected tournament director who had come specifically to scout Nate Walsh for upcoming regional championships. Impressive demonstration, Reynolds said, his tone making clear he wasn't referring to Derek's performance. But not what I expected from a school that emphasizes character development alongside technical skill. He handed Derek his business card, adding quietly, "Your dojo teaches pride, not discipline. We'll pass on featuring any of your students in the regional showcase." Reynolds then turned and bowed respectfully to Elijah before departing, leaving Derek holding the card like a verdict. The crowd's attention had shifted entirely to Elijah, surrounding him with questions and congratulations. Parents who had previously ignored the janitor now sought his opinion on their children's training. Students who had once mocked him asked tentative questions about his techniques. Through it all, Elijah maintained his humble demeanor, answering kindly but deflecting any attempt to elevate him or diminish Derek's school. Derek stood alone at the edge of the mat, watching his carefully constructed reputation crumble. The defeat itself was painful, but the public nature of it, witnessed by students, parents, and a respected figure in the martial arts community, was devastating. Without a word to anyone, he pushed through the crowd toward his office. Once inside, he slammed the door and stood facing the wall of achievements that had defined his identity for so long. Trophies, certificates, photographs of victorious moments. In the harsh light of what had just transpired, these symbols suddenly seemed hollow. He grabbed a small trophy from his desk and hurled it across the room, the sound of shattering glass a perfect counterpoint to the continued applause outside. The cracks in Derek Walsh's empire had appeared, and they were spreading quickly. Monday morning came with a strange new reality at Wilson's Martial Arts Academy. Elijah arrived at his usual time, cleaning cart in tow, dressed in his familiar janitor's uniform. He moved through his routine with the same quiet efficiency he had always shown. The difference was in how others responded to his presence. "Good morning, Sensei." A young white belt greeted him respectfully as Elijah mopped near the entrance. Elijah is fine," he replied with a gentle smile. "My dad says you're the real deal." The boy continued earnestly. "He says you showed more martial arts in 5 minutes than he's seen in years of watching tournaments." Similar interactions followed throughout the day. Students who had previously looked through Elijah now sought his attention. A few even asked if he would watch their forms and offer guidance. The cultural shift wasn't universal. Some students, particularly those closest to Coach Derek, maintained their distance, their expressions a mixture of confusion and resentment. The hierarchy that had seemed so permanent had been disrupted, and not everyone welcomed the change. Derek himself was notably absent that morning. Nate led the early classes, his teaching style subtly different. Less emphasis on power, more attention to proper form and balance. Whether this change was conscious or not remained unclear. By afternoon, rumors had begun circulating. Parents called the front desk asking if Elijah would be teaching classes. 3 families who had signed up during the open house specifically requested him as an instructor. Kayla found Elijah organizing equipment in the storage room during a break between classes. "Have you heard?" she asked excitedly. "Mrs. Bennett from the community center called. She wants to talk to you about starting a self-defense program for at-risk youth." Elijah paused, a stack of practice pads in his arms. "How did she get my name?" "I might have mentioned you," Kayla admitted. "After what happened Saturday, everyone's talking about you. She's been looking for someone to run a program for months." "I'm not looking to teach," Elijah said, returning to his task. "Why not? You're already teaching me." "That's different." "Is it?" Kayla challenged. "You have something valuable to share. Something authentic. Isn't that what martial arts is supposed to be about? Passing knowledge forward." Elijah didn't respond immediately, his expression thoughtful. "I'll think about it," he finally said. The following day, Derek returned to the dojo. His demeanor was subdued, His usual commanding presence diminished. He taught his classes mechanically, going through the motions without his typical showmanship. During the afternoon break, he found Elijah cleaning windows in the front lobby. "We should talk," Derek said, his tone carefully neutral. Elijah nodded, setting aside his cleaning supplies. "Not here," Derek added, glancing toward the students warming up for the next class. "My office." Once inside the office, Derek closed the door and took a seat behind his desk. Elijah remained standing, hands clasped loosely behind his back. "Why did you come here?" Derek asked directly. "Of all the dojos in the area, why mine?" "It wasn't about you," Elijah replied. "I needed work. You needed a janitor. It was that simple." Derek's expression suggested he didn't believe it was that simple at all. "You could have gone anywhere, taught anywhere, with your background." "I wasn't looking to teach. I was looking to disappear." "Because of what happened at the qualifiers?" Derek pressed that Elijah's gaze remained steady. "Because of what happened after. My brother needed full-time care. The medical bills were mounting. And my coach," he emphasized the word slightly, "had made it clear that my value was in what I could win, not who I was." Derek had the grace to look uncomfortable. "That was business. It wasn't personal." "It was personal to me," Elijah countered without raising his voice. "And to Marcus." A heavy silence fell between them, years of unspoken history filling the space. "We've had for cancellations since Saturday," Derek finally said, changing the subject. "Parents calling to withdraw their kids. 2 specifically mentioned your demonstration as the reason." "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you?" Derek's question carried an edge. "Yes," Elijah said simply. "I never wanted to damage your business. I just wanted to be treated with basic respect." Derek leaned back in his chair, studying the man who had once been his star pupil. "What do you want now? A teaching position? Part of the business?" "I don't want anything from you, Derek. Never did." "Then why stay? Why keep mopping floors if you don't have to?" Elijah considered the question carefully. "Because there's honor in honest work, no matter what that work is. Something you taught me, actually, before tournaments and sponsorships became more important." The reminder of his earlier teaching philosophy seemed to land heavily with Derek. He glanced at the wall of achievements, then back to Elijah. "The community center called about you," he said abruptly. "They want you to start some kind of youth program. I heard. Are you going to do it?" Elijah shrugged slightly. "I haven't decided." "You should," Derek said, surprising both of them. "You'd be good at it." Before Elijah could respond, a knock at the door interrupted them. Nate entered without waiting for a response. "Sorry, Dad, but Mrs. Wright is here about Parker's membership," he said, then noticed Elijah. "Oh, I didn't realize you were busy." "It's fine," Elijah said, moving toward the door. "We were finished." As he left, Nate gave him a nod that contained more respect than any interaction they'd had in the years Elijah had worked there. Later that week, a tentative new pattern began to emerge at the dojo. While Derek still led the advanced classes, the atmosphere had changed. The excessive aggression had been tempered, replaced by more emphasis on technical precision and mutual respect. Whether this change stemmed from genuine reflection or practical necessity wasn't clear, but the effect was noticeable. Enrollment continued to decline slightly, but not at the catastrophic rate Derek had initially feared. Some families left, but others, drawn by word of Elijah's demonstration, arrived to take their place. One evening, after classes had ended, Tyler approached Elijah as he cleaned the mirrors. "Can I talk to you for a minute?" the young black belt asked, his usual cockiness absent. "Of course," Elijah replied, setting down his cleaning cloth. Tyler shifted uncomfortably, struggling to find the right words. "I wanted to say, that is, the way you handled us at the open house." He took a deep breath. "I didn't know who you were. I didn't even care. That's on me, and I'm sorry." The apology was clearly difficult for him, coming from a place of genuine realization rather than obligation. Elijah extended his hand. "It's never too late to learn, Tyler. That's what the mat is for." Tyler accepted the handshake with visible relief. "Would you, maybe, show me that counter you used? The one where you barely moved, but completely redirected my energy." "Happy to," Elijah said with a smile. "After I finish the mirrors." Word of Elijah's informal guidance spread quickly among the students. Soon, several were staying after their regular classes, hoping for a few minutes of his attention. He never actively taught during dojo hours, careful not to undermine Derek's authority. But he would answer questions and occasionally demonstrate techniques for those who asked respectfully. In the storage room that served as his maintenance office, Elijah found a small box on his desk one afternoon. Inside was a broken trophy, the base cracked, the figurine separated from its mount. A note accompanied it. For the past. He recognized it immediately, the championship trophy from his final tournament, the one Derek had prominently displayed in his office for years despite their falling out. The gesture, while cryptic, seemed to acknowledge something that words had not yet addressed. Elijah carefully placed the broken trophy back in the box and set it aside. The past had its place, but his focus remained on the present point. 2 weeks after the open house, Kayla arrived at the dojo with news. Mrs. Bennett wants to meet with you tomorrow about the community center program. They've already got 15 kids signed up, and they haven't even officially announced it yet. I still haven't agreed to do it, Elijah reminded her. But you will, Kayla said confidently. And I want to help. I can handle the beginner kids while you work with the more advanced ones. Elijah raised an eyebrow. You've got it all planned out, haven't you? Someone has to, she grinned. You're too busy being humble to see what's happening. People are hungry for what you have to teach, not just techniques, but the way you approach martial arts. The respect, the control, the focus on development rather than domination. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and Elijah found himself considering possibilities he had long since abandoned. One class, he conceded. We'll start with one weekly class and see how it goes. Kayla's face lit up. That's all it will take. You'll see. The following weekend, Elijah and Kayla visited the community center's gymnasium. The space was far from ideal, dusty hardwood floors instead of proper mats, basketball hoops retracted against the ceiling, and walls in desperate need of fresh paint. But it was spacious, well lit by large windows, and most importantly, available. It's not much, the center's director apologized. Our budget is limited, but we can get some basic mats for safety, and the space is yours every Tuesday and Thursday evening if you want it. Elijah walked the perimeter, assessing the possibilities. It's perfect, he said finally. Perfect? The director repeated skeptically. It's practically falling apart. It's honest, Elijah clarified. No pretense, no fancy decorations or false promises. Just space to learn and grow. He gestured to the worn floor. We'll start here, with what we have, and build something real. As they prepared to leave, Elijah paused at the center of the gym. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling the potential of the space, not as it was, but as it could be. A place of genuine learning, of community, of growth without the pressure of trophies or tournaments. He reached into his gym bag and pulled out his folded GI. Without ceremony, he placed it against the wall, not as decoration, but as a promise. A promise to teach with integrity, to honor the true spirit of martial arts, and to create a space where anyone could learn regardless of their background or circumstances. A new dojo is born, Kayla said softly, understanding the significance of the gesture. Elijah nodded, a quiet certainty settling within him. Not a dojo, he corrected gently. A home. 6 weeks of preparation transformed the community center gymnasium from a neglected space into something approaching a proper training hall. The floor had been thoroughly cleaned, basic mats covered. The central area and simple equipment lined the walls. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just the essentials, much like Elijah's approach to martial arts itself. On opening day, Elijah arrived 2 hours early to prepare. He methodically arranged the space, adjusting the mats, checking the equipment, and finally changing into his GI. The fabric felt more natural now, less like a costume from his past, and more like a part of his present identity. As he centered himself in the empty room, the door opened. Kayla entered, also dressed in her GI, her eyes bright with excitement. Ready for this? She asked. We'll find out, Elijah replied with a small smile. By 6 o'clock, people began to arrive. Some were children from the surrounding neighborhoods, many from challenging backgrounds. Others were teenagers seeking structure and discipline. A few adults showed up too, drawn by word of mouth about the janitor who had humbled an entire dojo of black belts. Mrs. Bennett, the community center director, watched from the doorway as the room filled beyond their most optimistic projections. I think we might need a bigger space, she murmured to Kayla. When the time came to begin, Elijah stepped to the center of the room. The chatter died down as 40 pairs of eyes focused on him. He took a breath, centered himself, and spoke with quiet confidence. "Welcome," he said. "Before we begin, I want to be clear about what we're doing here. We fight no one but our past selves here. Every technique you learn, every drill you practice, every breath you take is about becoming better than you were yesterday, not better than the person next to you." He gestured to the simple surroundings. "We don't have fancy equipment. We don't have trophies or competitive rankings. What we have is more valuable, the opportunity to grow together with respect and purpose." As Elijah continued his introduction, outlining his expectations and approach, a late arrival slipped through the door. Derek Walsh stood at the back of the room, dressed not in his usual instructor's uniform, but in casual clothes. His presence sent a ripple of whispers through those who recognized him. Elijah noticed immediately, but continued without interruption. "Let's begin with the most fundamental aspect of any martial discipline: proper breathing and stance. The foundation upon which everything else is built." For the next hour, Elijah and Kayla guided the diverse group through basic exercises. Elijah moved among them, offering gentle corrections and encouragement. His teaching style was noticeably different from what most had experienced. No shouting, no demands for perfection, just patient guidance and authentic engagement with each student. Halfway through the class, during a brief water break, Derek approached the front of the room. The tension was palpable as he and Elijah stood face to face. "You here to inspect the mats?" Elijah asked with unexpected lightness, defusing the moment that a flicker of surprise crossed Derek's face, followed by the ghost of a smile. "Just observing." Their exchange was interrupted as students returned to their positions. Derek stepped back, finding a place against the wall where he could watch the remainder of the class. As Elijah resumed teaching, he was acutely aware of Derek's scrutiny. Yet instead of creating tension, it fueled his focus. Every instruction, every demonstration became an opportunity to embody the principles he believed in, principles that Derek had once taught before ambition overshadowed them. When the class concluded, students lingered, eager to ask questions, or simply thank Elijah for the experience. Derek waited patiently until the crowd thinned, then approached again. Without preamble, he removed his shoes and stepped onto the mat. Then, in a gesture that stunned the remaining observers, he bowed deeply to Elijah, the traditional sign of respect from one martial artist to another. "I forgot what this place was supposed to be," Derek said quietly as he straightened. "You reminded me." Elijah returned the bow, equally formal. "It's never too late to remember." "My dojo is struggling," Derek admitted. "Enrollment down 30%. 2 instructors giving notice." He paused, visibly wrestling with his pride. "I have equipment, good mats, training gear, protective padding, sitting and used. It could be put to better use here." Elijah studied his former coach, searching for hidden motives, but finding only genuine, if difficult, humility. "That's generous," he said carefully. "It's not generosity," Derek corrected. "It's atonement, or the beginning of it." "Equipment would help," Elijah acknowledged. "But there's something more basic we need first." "Name it." Elijah's expression remained serious, but his eyes held a hint of challenge. "Help clean the mats first. We'll talk after." Derek blinked, clearly not expecting this response. For a moment, it seemed he might refuse, his pride still tender from recent events. Then, with a slow nod of acceptance, he rolled up his sleeves. "Where do you keep the mop?" For the next hour, Derek Walsh, former champion, dojo owner, and self-proclaimed master, cleaned alongside Elijah. Together, they wiped down mats, organized equipment, and prepared the space for the following day's class. Few words passed between them, but in the shared labor, something shifted. Not forgiveness, perhaps, but the possibility of it. The following weekend brought another significant moment for Elijah's fledgling program. A local martial arts association hosted a small exhibition where schools from around the county could showcase their students' progress. Kayla had registered their community center group without telling Elijah, convinced that the experience would benefit their students. "They don't need trophies or competitions," she argued when Elijah expressed hesitation. "But they do need to see that they belong in the larger community, that what they're learning has value beyond our 4 walls." Reluctantly, Elijah agreed to a demonstration-only participation. No competition, just a brief showcase of what they had been practicing. The event was held at the County Recreation Center, with various martial arts schools setting up in different sections of the main gymnasium. Derek Wilson's Martial Arts Academy had a prominent position near the entrance. Though their display was noticeably smaller than in previous years, Elijah's group occupied a modest corner, their only identification. A simple banner that read Community Center Martial Arts Program. Their students, though less uniformly outfitted than other schools, showed a focus and discipline that drew attention from passing spectators. When the time came for their demonstration, Kayla led the younger students through basic forms while Elijah narrated the principles behind each movement. Then the older students demonstrated simple but effective self-defense techniques, emphasizing awareness and de-escalation before physical response. As they concluded, Kayla stepped forward for a brief solo demonstration, a test for her recent training. She faced an imaginary opponent, moving through a complex series of techniques with remarkable precision. Every movement reflected Elijah's teaching, efficient, centered, purposeful without being flashy. When she finished, the audience applauded enthusiastically. Kayla bowed deeply to Elijah, tears welling in her eyes. Not from the public recognition, but from the knowledge of how far she had come in such a short time. As their students gathered their belongings, a familiar figure approached from across the gymnasium. Nate Walsh, Derek's son, made his way to Elijah. "Dad sent me to ask if you need help transporting your equipment back to the center," he said, his tone respectful. "We have the dojo van." "That would be helpful," Elijah replied. "Thank you." As they organized the logistics, Nate added hesitantly, "I've been watching your teaching approach. It's different from what I'm used to." "Different isn't always better or worse," Elijah said. "Just different. In this case, I think it might be better," Nate admitted. The students seem to actually understand why they're doing things, not just how to do them. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a wheelchair at the edge of their demonstration area. A man in his late 20s, with features similar to Elijah's but marked by years of health struggles, observed them with keen interest. "Marcus." Elijah's voice betrayed rare surprise. "How did you?" "Kayla called me," Marcus Banks explained, gesturing toward Kayla, who stood a few feet away, looking both pleased and nervous about her initiative. "Said my big brother was finally teaching again. Had to see it for myself." Elijah knelt beside his brother's wheelchair, emotion evident in his usually composed expression. "You shouldn't have come. The trip is too much for you. New treatments are working better than the old ones," Marcus replied with a grin. "Doctor says I'm improving. Might even walk with assistance soon." His expression grew serious. "You did all this for me, Elijah." "Gave up everything. I did what needed to be done," Elijah said simply. Marcus shook his head. "You sacrificed your career, your passion, everything you'd worked for, all to pay for my treatments and care." He gestured around at the students packing up. "It's time you built something for yourself again." Their conversation continued privately as Elijah wheeled his brother toward the exit. Behind them, Kayla organized the remaining students, her role as Elijah's trusted assistant now firmly established. Later that evening, as they unloaded equipment at the community center, Derek approached Elijah with unusual hesitation. "There's something you should know," he said, glancing around to ensure privacy. "I've spoken to the Regional Martial Arts Association Board. Told them the truth about what happened 9 years ago." Elijah stilled. "What truth?" "That I pushed you to compete while injured. That I tried to manipulate you into a predatory contract." Derek looked away, clearly uncomfortable with his confession. "That I valued winning above your well-being." "Why tell them now?" "Because they still had you blacklisted as having broken contract obligations," Derek admitted. "It was the only way to clear your name officially. You're reinstated as a recognized black belt instructor now. The paperwork came through yesterday." Elijah absorbed this information silently. The formal recognition meant little to him personally. He had long since moved beyond needing institutional validation. But it removed a barrier that had lingered in the background, potentially limiting his ability to build something lasting for his students. "Thank you," he said finally. "That couldn't have been easy." Derek shrugged, attempting to downplay the significance of his action. "Just setting things right. Better late than never." The following week, Elijah made a simple but profound gesture. At the community center, he mounted his cleaning mop and his black belt side by side on the wall of their training space. Beneath them, he placed a small sign. You don't stop being who you are because of what people call you. When students asked about the unusual display, Elijah explained that every role has dignity if approached with the right mindset, and that true mastery isn't about titles or recognition, but about how fully you engage with whatever you're doing. That night, after everyone had left, Elijah sat alone on the mats. The empty room held a special quality in these quiet moments. Not silence exactly, but a kind of peaceful potential, as if the space itself remembered every lesson taught within it. Kayla found him there, entering quietly and taking a seat beside him. "What are you thinking?" she asked. Elijah smiled. "That every warrior has a story, but not every story has a warrior willing to write the ending." 1 year passed, bringing changes that even Elijah could not have anticipated. The community center program had grown from a twice-weekly class to a full-fledged school with daily sessions. What began with 40 curious participants had expanded to over 200 regular students of all ages and backgrounds. The physical space had evolved as well. Through community fundraising and strategic partnerships, they had renovated the entire gymnasium. Proper training mats now covered the floors, equipment lined the walls, and large mirrors allowed students to observe their form. Despite these improvements, Elijah maintained the unpretentious atmosphere that had defined their beginning. The growth necessitated additional instructors. Tyler, having left Derek's dojo to train under Elijah, now taught beginner classes 3 evenings a week. Kayla had developed into an exceptional teacher, specializing in women's self-defense and children's classes. Together with Elijah, they formed the core of a teaching philosophy that emphasized personal growth over competition. That Derek's dojo had undergone its own transformation. After initially struggling with declining enrollment, Derek had made difficult but necessary changes. The focus on tournament success and aggressive techniques had been tempered with greater emphasis on character development and practical self-defense. While still smaller than in its heyday, Wilson's Martial Arts Academy had stabilized with a more sustainable approach. Derek himself had found an unexpected calling. Working with the local children's hospital, he developed a specialized martial arts program for children with physical disabilities and developmental challenges. Twice weekly, he taught small classes that adapted traditional techniques to each child's unique abilities. In these sessions, the ambitious coach who had once prioritized trophies above all else discovered a fulfillment that no competition could provide. The relationship between Elijah and Derek remained complex. Not friendship exactly, but a mutual respect built on shared history and parallel journeys. Occasionally, Derek would visit the community center to observe classes or share ideas. Likewise, Elijah sometimes referred students with competition interests to Derek's more structured program. The martial arts community was better for having both approaches available. On a warm Saturday morning in June, Elijah received an unexpected invitation. The National Martial Arts Association was hosting its annual convention in a nearby city, and they wanted him to deliver a keynote address. The title they proposed, Strength in Stillness. "You have to do it," Kayla insisted when Elijah expressed hesitation. "Your story needs to be heard by more people than just us." "My story isn't special," Elijah countered. "It absolutely is," she argued. "How many nationally ranked competitors disappear at the peak of their career, spend years as a janitor being disrespected daily, and then emerge to build something authentic from scratch? Your journey embodies everything martial arts should be about: humility, perseverance, integrity." Eventually persuaded, Elijah agreed to speak at the convention. His preparation was characteristically thoughtful, not focused on impressing the audience with technical jargon or grand philosophies, but on sharing honest reflections about his journey from champion to janitor to teacher. The weekend of the convention arrived quickly. As Elijah prepared to leave for his presentation, his students surprised him with a small ceremony at the community center. Each student, from the youngest white belt to the most advanced, presented a single white flower, together forming a beautiful arrangement symbolizing the community they had built together. "These represent our gratitude," Kalo explained, her voice thick with emotion, "for showing us that martial arts is about becoming better people, not just better fighters." The convention hall was packed when Elijah took the stage. Martial artists from various disciplines, school owners, and equipment vendors filled the seats, curious about the formerly anonymous janitor whose story had begun spreading through their community. Elijah spoke without notes, his words flowing from decades of experience and reflection. He talked about the hollow nature of achievement without purpose, the dignity found in humble work, and the true meaning of strength, not as power over others, but as mastery of oneself. He shared how his years cleaning mats had taught him as much about martial arts as his years competing on them. The path of a warrior isn't about who you defeat, he concluded. It's about what you overcome, especially within yourself. The standing ovation that followed was a testament to the universal truth in his message. Many approached him afterward, sharing how his words had resonated with their own struggles to maintain authenticity in a martial arts world increasingly focused on commercial success. 2 weeks after the convention, another significant moment arrived. Kayla, having trained diligently under Elijah's guidance for over a year, was ready for her black belt examination. Rather than conducting a typical test of physical techniques, Elijah designed an evaluation that encompassed teaching ability, philosophical understanding, and practical application. When the day came, Kayla demonstrated not just technical proficiency, but a deep internalization of the principles Elijah had emphasized. Her movements reflected years of dedicated practice. Her teaching showed genuine concern for student development, and her responses to theoretical questions revealed mature understanding. At the ceremony's conclusion, Elijah presented her with a simple black belt, no stripes or elaborate embroidery, just the fundamental symbol of her achievement. As he tied it around her waist, he spoke quietly. "You didn't earn this with power. You earned it with patience." The gathered students and families applauded enthusiastically. Among them sat Marcus Banks, now using a cane instead of a wheelchair, his health continuing to improve through new treatments and therapies. Beside him sat Derek Walsh, his presence a tacit acknowledgement of Kayla's accomplishment and Elijah's teaching legacy. After the ceremony, Marcus approached his brother. "Remember when you first brought me home from the hospital?" he asked. "You said you'd do whatever it took to help me walk again." "I remember," Elijah nodded. "You gave up everything for me." Marcus continued, leaning on his cane. "Now it's my turn to walk with you." He gestured around at the thriving school, not just physically, but in building this legacy. As the celebration continued, Elijah noticed a quiet boy of about 13 methodically cleaning up discarded cups and plates. Unlike most kids his age, who would rush through such a task, he approached it with unusual attention to detail. "Thank you for helping," Elijah said, approaching him. The boy looked up, surprised to be addressed by the head instructor. "Just trying to keep things nice, sir," Elijah observed as the boy continued his careful work, recognizing something familiar in his focused demeanor. "What's your name?" "Michael Taylor, sir. I just started classes last month." "Do you enjoy the training, Michael?" The boy nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, sir. I especially like the forms. They make me feel." He searched for the right word. "Centered." Elijah smiled, recognizing himself in the thoughtful young student. "Would you be interested in learning some advanced breathing techniques? They might help with your forms." Michael's eyes widened. "Really? You'd teach me directly?" "I think you have the right mindset for it," Elijah replied. "Sometimes the most important quality isn't natural talent, but careful attention." Later that evening, as the community center emptied, Elijah took time for his own practice. Alone on the mat, he moved through forms he had performed thousands of times over decades. There was no audience to impress, no competition to win, just movement, breath, and the meditative focus that had sustained him through championships and janitorial work alike. This was the essence he had rediscovered, martial arts practiced for its own sake, for the internal benefits rather than external validation. The circle was complete. In the front entry of the school, Elijah had placed his first GI in a simple glass case. Beside it hung a framed quote, "Respect is silent. Let your movement speak." When offered a prestigious coaching position with a regional team the following month, Elijah declined without hesitation. "I'm right where I'm needed," he explained to the disappointed recruiter. On quiet evenings, after classes ended and students departed, Elijah often practiced alone, not to maintain fighting skills or prepare for instruction, but simply to experience the peace that came from movement performed with complete attention. Just as he had done secretly for 9 years as a janitor, he now practiced openly as a teacher. The practice itself unchanged, only the context surrounding it. I cleaned their mats, he once told Kayla when she asked what kept him going during those years of anonymity. Then I cleaned their egos. But in truth, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I just needed them to remember what this all really meant. And in his quiet way, through humble service followed by authentic teaching, Elijah Banks had done exactly that, reminding an entire community what martial arts was meant to be. Have you ever wondered what greatness walks silently among us, overlooked because of the uniform they wear? If this story moved you, hit that like button, subscribe for more untold journeys, and share with someone who needs to be reminded that true mastery begins with humility.